Hello again. I'm thrilled to kick off this panel. Thank you, Tom, for that intro. The setup I thought was spot on, and couldn't be more delighted to be joined by two good friends of mine here who are working on one of the most important technological innovations that we are going to see in our career. I truly believe that. So very excited to hear your perspectives. By way of quick introductions, I have with me here on stage Andy Mapes, the Acting Principal Deputy Chief Digital and AI Officer. He has served an exemplary career of public service, including in intelligence officer roles at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence and other senior roles in the Pentagon. To his left, we also have Justin Fanelli here. He is the Chief Technology Officer for the Department of the Navy and the Technical Director of PEO Digital. Justin's held a range of technical leadership roles in the defense enterprise and is a well-known and respected thought leader, lecturer, and speaker. Thanks so much for joining me, both of you.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah.
Okay, great. Andy, can I ask you to give us the scene setter on this topic? There's so much to cover. And so I would love to hear a little bit about what you see as some of the most important points coming out of the artificial intelligence strategy that the Department of War released earlier this calendar year.
Yeah, thanks, Tara. I was laughing the last time I was here. I think it was for a Brandi Carlile concert, so a bit of a different vibe. But yeah, the AI strategy came out in January of this year from the Secretary. Very much focused on speed as a primary factor. And so I think bringing technology to the department is not something that people traditionally think of speed as associated with that. But prior to that, we had the rollout of GenAI.mil. Something that very proud of. We were able to take from concept to execution to include ATO just under a few months, but the ATO itself took about 50 days. And so pushing that out to the entire enterprise. With the AI strategy, really focusing on getting to the basics and the fundamentals, doing that very well. So with that, the data management piece of that. So Gavin Kleiger recently onboarded as our Chief Data Officer, very much focused on ensuring that we have the data at the right levels to enable inference, but then also working through the bureaucratic barriers that would historically block us from being able to access that data. With the AI strategy too, there's 7 pace-setting projects focused on or aligned under 3 different verticals on warfighting, intelligence, and enterprise, more focused on kind of the traditional back office business functions. But with that too, we're also focused on modernizing what is the legacy Advana data platform, which is now called the War Data Platform, rationalizing the tools and application layer, working with comptroller to really enable them to do audit, pass an audit, but then modernizing that data layer as well to truly be a defense repository for common enterprise data. And not have that data be locked into a specific mission area. So the data that one person is using for a warfighter use case is another person's intel data, is another person's business data. I think the last panel talked a little bit about that. I know Govini knows that well. And so really ensuring that the department has the data to fuel the AI work that needs to be done. And with the pace-setting projects, working with partners to really move at speed and show the potential that we have when it's not just one office working in isolation, but working across the department to move very quickly. And pulling partners like Justin in the Navy who have fast follower projects. And so really working across the entire enterprise to continue to make progress. With that too is the concept of a barrier removal board. So really looking at those those blockers, those challenges that historically have not had the leadership backing, it has not been the right environment, or have prevented us from doing things that everybody's sitting around and wondering, why can we not do this? So taking another run up the hill to do some hard things. So I'll pause there, but I think that's really kind of the gist.
Okay, that's fantastic. I'm still thinking about Brandy.
I'm still thinking about Brandy Carmichael too.
Yeah.
We were going to try and do a duet, but rather I wanted to piggyback off of that point. So there's an old saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. We want to do both. And so it's a matter of alignment, right?
Yep.
And so we actually have a situation where we're going fast together, aligned. In 27 years, I've seen it for specific surges, but I've never really seen it scale. And this is a case where it is working. And so the 7 pace-setting projects, if you've done anything in and around this community, whether you're private sector and you're trying to help the public sector, or you're public sector and trying to get something done, barriers just pop up. They pop up from known places and unknown places, and no one's the bureaucracy, but everyone's the bureaucracy. And here's the point. You can run through walls, some by yourself, but the idea of teeing those up, we have exceptions to policy, changes to policy, and then we have hero work. We're scaling the things that are working, and when people come with data that says, hey, this traditionally takes 18 months, why? We brought that to the CDAO team, and they were like, hey, let's just do this faster. Let's get the telemetry. Let's look at this. And so that is a kind of a re-envisioning data ground up way to operate in a way that empirically scales just by design. So I just wanted to comment on how exciting that is. Like, it's baking in the speed of trust, to quote the name of the panel.
Yeah.
And I think Justin, that's really kind of as far as CDAO, I've had a lot of questions recently as far as the focus of the organization, where we're going. Not just CDAO, but the department has been on a rolling experiment for a decade. Mm-hmm. And not just AI, but data as well. And for us, continue to really fine tune our focus to be on the enterprise, having those enterprise effects. How much can we do for the common good? And that really comes out through the AI strategy, focused on transforming the way the department does business, but also doing it in a way that is not just us, rolling out a capability through all a capability, but this is supposed to really alter behavior, shift the way the department is doing not just day-to-day, business systems, but also looking at war fighting, looking at Title 10, Title 50 data issues, and really pushing the envelope to see what is possible.
What do you think? Everything that you said sounds wonderful, and also we've heard all of it before. And so what is going to make this time different, Andy? And I want to, Justin, come back and clarify what you were saying, because is that the barrier removal board that you're discussing, which sounds amazing and also unheard of in the Pentagon? And so I'd love to understand more of that. If there's an example that's appropriate to share, that would be fantastic, I think, for the audience. But one quick question on culture and leadership. The idea of doing all those things that you just described is so important for getting people to adopt something, especially something like AI, into their work that is so different from how they operate today. And yet the intent has long been there. What do you do differently to get people to actually change behavior? Or how are you thinking about it in CDAO?
Yeah, so I feel like there's a few factors that, trust me, this time is different. I think one is we have an industrial base that is much more mature and ready to work with us than we have historically had. And that's not, speaking negatively of the defense industrial base in any way. I think, the experiment that I talked about with CDAO and the department, our partners in the private sector are going through the same experience. We have ways of being able to bring the department in that we've figured out as far as contracting that makes us much more agile and able to move at pace, and taking lessons learned from the GenAI.mil experience, figuring out how we can have faster legal reviews, how we can do ATOs faster, how we can onboard contractors much more quickly. All of those things, when you're trying to start a contract and kick things off, that delays you and prevents you from being able to move quickly. And I think with that too, we also have the leadership emphasis from across the board. We're no longer having conversations trying to pitch a concept. If anything, the question is, why are we not moving faster? And so, a lot of the, having been a part of this problem set for almost a decade at this point, historically, you're looking at these problems and they're more niche issues, or they were more niche issues. You look at how Advana as a platform started from the universe of transactions to the defense repository for common enterprise data to become Advana, and really, really evolve from a bespoke comptroller tool to never waste a good crisis with COVID, and then evolve into that true enterprise data layer. I think is representative of kind of the broader story arc, and so to me that is the difference. We're in a different environment with very very broad leadership buy-in, but also the expectation day to day that these are tools that the entire workforce, all 3 million people that we were able to send out an email to from the secretary, which was the best distro list I think the department's ever seen. But it's really continuing to push the envelope and change that expectation and dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely. I am gobsmacked by the idea of an ATO in 50 days in a very, very good way. And so one of the things I'd love to hear about at some point, I feel like we teed up a couple of issues here, is how when you're demonstrating that success, when you have a win, when you move at speed, how do you then push those lessons out to the rest of the department? How does it get adopted by the services? How do others know, okay, wait, we can do this?
Yep. Well, so I'd say one of the ways, I'm going to tie two things together. One is, why do we believe it's different? Proof at this point. Yeah. Like we have accumulating proof, and then where does this happen? Kind of like any great transformation, there's bottoms-up evidence and there's top-down evidence, right? Yeah. And so what bottoms-up evidence looks like is pre-barrier removal board, people would run into walls, and then occasionally we'd have that maverick who was like, I'm just going to keep at it, right? Like the ghost of Colonel Boyd. And so what that looked like was, in the last year, we've had 12 exceptions to policy where someone said, I have the data, I have the telemetry, here is why this policy costs more than the solution would ever cost. Just change this policy, right? And those got changed. And so that part is bubbling up. If you have enough specifics, not like your ATO process sucks. Yeah, I agree, but that's not super actionable, right? Here is 18 months down to 50 days, let's roll, that's the new normal. And so that's what the top down looks like, is if someone is doing something really well and speed is an organizing construct, then let's scale what works. And so what we've done in the Navy, Department of Navy, is we said, hey, we have some of these tools that are working. We have mechanisms like structured challenges, where we had a lieutenant colonel from the Marine Corps who said, this is a good concept. We have it happening, but it's not centralized. Let's centralize the operations of challenges, but then open up the aperture wider. And so he ran innovation challenges. That's structured challenges. That's in the innovation adoption kit. Similarly, how are pilots going? Well, we used to do a handful of pilots that are spread out, a little bit of spray and pray. Now we have a body of, here are 100 pilots that are meant to be disruptive. Which ones are actually working and which ones are getting killed? And the proof in some of these cases, I had a company come to me the other day, they're on contract for something little, and I said, how did you compare what we call in software A/B testing to the as is? And they said, we're 17,000 times better. And I was like, I want to make sure you understood the question. And they're like, yeah, your baseline is bad.
Yeah.
Okay, that's believable. Is there anything we can divest? Yes. Is it one-to-one or one-to-many? It's one-to-many. And so part of that is the mechanism and people paying attention to data, and data travels as well as stories, and so we have those pieces. The other one is, this is knowledge work, and so if you have data and you have really talented people, like you can actually go 100 to 1,000 times faster, right? And so I think we have a set of people who want to be data-driven, who are in the mission. This is the mission generation. We can get more wins this year than the last 5 years combined.
Yeah. We feel the same way on the industry side. I think you both know that. And, I stood up here this morning and I said, this year is different. This is not a moment, it is the moment for those of us who have been working for 15, 20 years on bringing more companies, not just different companies, just more companies, different kinds of companies, expanding the industrial base, expanding the businesses that work in defense and on American military issues and needs and requirements.
If they can prove it, right? And so
If
the top of the funnel is there,
Yeah.
and so they're doing the pitting, right? Like we're giving them like kind of the aperture, but like they have to figure out, hey, here, companies are doing a better job now of not coming up to us and saying, we have a technology. And we're like, great. Like, what do I do with it? Versus like, here's an operational problem, here's your status quo legacy systems, here's what we can do, here's how much faster. The number of pilots we've had this year that turned into systems of record and that look like they're gonna be enterprise services is like, it's remarkable. Like it's like 50% of our pilots.
That's fantastic.
And I think along those lines too, pilots are great, but pilots in perpetuity are not.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And same thing with programs, especially as we're looking at, we talked a little bit before we came out here about CJADC2, which CJADC2, Defense Business Systems are both kind of my white whales, but really trying to come up with the programmatic framework for how the department is looking at CJADC2 and programs that, at one point in time made sense. How do we continue to evaluate those investments? Same thing with pilots. Do we understand what the transition of that looks like once it reaches maturity or doesn't? And do we have the intestinal fortitude in the building to say, no, that's not going to work?
That's right.
And so I think those hard decisions are ones that, talking to my teammates like Justin, like we're becoming more and more comfortable, but also feeling empowered to be able to, make sure that leadership understands that that's kind of what's working and what's not. But also I think as the department matures, going back to the what's different theme too, I think we understand a bit more of like what our requirements are and what we need to.
Yeah. Well, just the decisiveness alone. I mean, I think in industry, we just want to compete.
Yep.
We want the opportunity to compete, to be able to show up, to say we have something that solves this operational problem. Can we get in and have a bite at the real apple? And that requires the ability to deploy on a network and the ability to get access to, defense data and these other things that if you can do that, not just for the incumbent, but you can do that in an environment where then you actually test the capability, well, then there is a decision to be made, and that just requires leadership, but we're seeing more and more of that too.
Good.
Were you going to chime in as
Yeah,
well?
well, data is actually like doth setting us free here, right?
Yeah.
And so we're saying like, hey, can you prove it on paper first? Because you can't pile everything into systems.
Definitely not.
There's a limited number of people. There's any number of constraints. So we filter out. We have thousands of companies in Horizon 3. What actually goes into a pilot in Horizon 2 is a legitimate, concerted, you had to be at the top of the stack. What's interesting is we're going in now with the assumption, and the pilot leads are the same way, of we don't assume that this is going to make it through or get to keep living, right? The default is prove it or you're out, right? And so that's do I squirt over into Horizon 1 or do I had a Noble Reach scholar come to me the other day and he said, hey, I want to use technology modernization fund to fund a pilot. And I was like, okay, it has to be a big enough bet that it gets funding, but it has to be fast enough that you can prove it, because most pilots, if they're not making progress after 3 months, it's out of there. And he said, okay, I am going to build the mission case and the business case based on that, and we're going to pitch something up. And so that's, again, a case where we're working not even just in DOW, but government-wide, to use money to surge something and really just open the door like Matador for the private sector.
Yeah.
I think with that too, so talking about things that are different in both in the building, also talking to our friends on the Hill. I think there is an expectation to take some risk, whereas before you had to operate a bit more cautiously. But in this space right now, I think I like Justin's word, bets. Like we need to take some bets. If we're truly in a race, you're not going to get there by being conservative. You saw that with how we approached GenAI.mil. We're pushing there the CJAD C2 space, and then also just how we're continuing to try to evolve the enterprise capabilities that CDAO is looking at, and also working with our service partners too. And so I think continue to take some very good bets. But I think the expectation for risk is there too.
Yeah.
Can I, one more on that? So to Andy's
and
point.
Another thing.
Like that's portfolio management, right?
Yes.
And so like we used to have like one bet, which is kind of no bet at all, right? Like when CJAD C2 was something like a monolith, like you're like, okay, that's big, and all. If we have, here are creative disruption bets, here are middle of the road bets, here are safer bets, and that's you're actually doing portfolio management, then you have enough in the chute where you can actually measure conversion, right? And so we're saying like, what's converting? Where is the needle? The people here are innovative enough, right? Like we'll always take more, but the innovation is there. Can we adopt it? And how much are we converting on that? And so that's a case where if we just stockpile wins, if we double what we've done already this year or keep that anteing up, I think that'll be enough proof for everybody, our friends on the Hill, and oh, that's way different, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the person who's at the table with all of the bets. They're winning their bets.
Right, yes. I think, all right, so a couple of things came up there, CJAD C2, enterprise versus pushing AI out to the edge, low baselines. I will tell you a story of, I was talking to an Air Force leader about a pilot that we had run, and we said, great news, in this one program office, we tripled your aircraft availability. And I mean, that's a pretty good stat. We put multiple airplanes in the air that then went on and helped execute the raid in Venezuela. And so we were very excited about this. And he was like, yeah, but where'd you start? The baselines are so low. And so the question that I'm curious about both of you weighing in on is the application and adoption of AI in not just the operational side, but also in warfighting acquisition, in warfighting enablers, in things like readiness acquisition, sustainment. Do you see that as also as far along as you see some of these other areas where we're talking about the wins?
So, a couple pieces there. One is like your point on baseline is important. Two is benchmarks help, because like there was a while there where each of the military departments or services were like, we're totally unique, like our edge situation is different from every, like we're sharing now. And so like we have more opportunities for benchmarks. Hey, here's something that we learned in one part of the world. Let's apply it here. That adaptation cycle is going better. And then we have targets in terms of like impact or minimum, but more, we're not capping the upside on some of these bets. So, like when they came and said, we're 17,000% better, like, I don't know, there's a contracting officer out there somewhere who was probably thinking like, well, we only paid for 1,000%.
Exactly.
You're like, okay, but like, let's talk about value and let's like let it rip. And so if we are actually opening the door and kind of like letting that happen, and I can give other examples where we said, oh, we'd like to do 5 of these this year. We got it onto one carrier, Flank Speed Wireless, and the chief systems officer told others, and his buddies were like, I want that. And so it went on 11 carriers in a really short period of time, right? Like, we could have rate limited that. They found it, right? Like, they found the ability to do that. And if we can divest and capture, and divest and then reinvest along the way, like, we have evidence of flywheelness right now.
Yeah, I think continue to make the barrier to entry to access the tools continues to be a key. Lesson learned for us. I saw on the screen there a question about the form or policy. I think it was question 2 that I would most like to see get nuked. The 2875 SAR form is at the top of my list. I'll pay you after the event.
Stand up if you're clapping for a standard form. All right.
Yeah, this is the coolest conference ever. But I think for us with GenAI.mil, we have it as the default to pop up on web browsers. There's a icon on government furnished mobile devices as well. And we had other things like the secretary's video. There's posters across the Pentagon. I think continuing to put the capability at the fingertips of the users is the fastest way to continue to drive adoption. I think the corollary to that is Advana, which is behind the 2875 form. We've had high rates of adoption, but I also wonder if we're able to figure out EICAM and continue to make that much easier for users to access what that's going to look like. And so for us, that continues to be the really the focus is putting the technology in users' hands. GenAI.mil is an example. The same thing though. Going out to Stratcom a couple months ago and talking to a young Air Force 03 who was just really leaning into his JADER and figuring out how to completely transform how they're doing business, not just in operational setting, but also just their day-to-day planning cycles. That to me is what success looks like and what we're targeting.
Well, thank you for the context. I completely ignored the questions, and they're not up on the screen
She
anymore.
really did.
So
She
let
really
me
did.
share that context with the audience. There was a question suggested, which was if you could remove one blocker or barrier to driving AI adoption in the system, what would it be? Justin, I'd love to hear your answer too, but before we move on, Andy, can you, for those who weren't clapping for the standard form you referenced, can you just tell the audience members what it is?
Yeah, so oftentimes it's a requirement for an authority to operate. And this is not a shot at the CISOs in the room. Don't go back and tell Aaron Bishop or Jonathan Buchanan that I'm taking shots at them. Yeah, I think it goes back to, so the form itself, standard user information. There's, a box to check that you did your cyber awareness training. Your supervisor needs to sign it. It's a PDF form, and it just kills me. But I think it comes back to there has to be a way that we can do things more efficiently, but also some risk acceptance as well. And so that's the form that I think if I have a week where I don't have a senior leader in the department reach out to myself or our war data platform lead on frustrations with the 2875 form, but also trying to explain that to the Doge team when they came into the Pentagon last year. As far as a process, I think it's a great opportunity for us to remove that barrier to entry as well.
Yeah.
You like my least favorite standard form. So the way that I answer this question is the worst part of any policy that is obstructing value. And so we have, I think, data has given us, data and leadership have given us enough leverage to say, is this impeding us from making a difference? So how many controls are in the ATO process? 4
Marco,
digits,
where are
right? And how many of them don't increase security? Any of those that are in the way, that are not helping. And so policies are written at a point in time, and some of them evolve or living, and some of them aren't. But where we can have people internally and externally say, here is the value of this policy, and then here's where it's not helping us, then carving them up, doing an exception, proving it, and then scaling that. And so like it's dozens or hundreds of places. Anything that is a barrier that is stopping, there are good policies, right? But any part of a policy that is stopping us arbitrarily is an opportunity to refine and get to that. And so like we use outcome-driven metrics to tee up what actually saves time and what doesn't, right?
Yeah.
And so like from an adoption perspective, the standard, I'll use like a local example. The policy for enterprise service designation is we have a meeting and then we schedule another meeting. Okay. And so how long was it going to take to get GenAI.mil designated? Like significant amount of time. It worked. It worked better than what we had. That was logical. We're on the phone at 10:30 at night, 22:30, talking through. And so like it actually probably helps to talk through this example. So it wasn't the first generative AI we had access to. We had a handful of pilots that were in Horizon 2, some of them better than others. This was better than all of them. And so we said, hey, there's no shame in us killing your pilot. Something better came along. You got users trained, you got wins along the way, but that just feeds the better enterprise service. And so we designated that thing with like through the Secretary of the Navy in like a day or like a little bit like right in there, and then said, hey, now we get to turn off the other ones. Everything got better and simpler, right? And so processes and policies exist so that we can get the outcomes that we want.
Does this now become a roadmap for other initiatives, especially ones that are collaborative between CDAO and services, or that are department-wide, or is it a one-off?
No, I think it's, looking at question 3 here, we're going right down.
Should I read
list.
the questions?
Yeah, no,
Was I supposed to look at
no, it's good. So talking about the decision to launch GenAI.mil. So thanks, by the way, for maybe doing that.
Thanks for having something so good that it was easy to do it, right?
I think it's I think it's a playbook, and continue to look at we're really focused on taking lessons learned from that, and is there a way for us to compress the ATO timeline down to 3 days? And what does that look like at scale? And so obviously a lot of work that we need to do to be able to expand that. But the GenAI.mil work Justin just talked about, it did not start in the perfect circumstances. So we're in the midst of a transition from CDAO realigning to R&E under the Chief Technology Officer, Honorable Emil Michael, and we had a government shutdown in there. But it was as far as lessons learned in that playbook, I think it did demonstrate that not only could we pull together not just within one organization, but pulling our Air Force teammates in, pulling our Navy teammates in, working very closely with DISA and CIO as partners. Optimistically, we thought when we first kicked that off late July, early August, that we were going to be able to get it done by maybe late January if everything worked out well. But we were ready to go probably around Thanksgiving timeframe. So things really unfolded very quickly, and I think it did show the rest of the department. It showed us, that what we can do, and really serve as a playbook for other initiatives. I think the thing that I do appreciate too, talking about the services. So we worked with Air Force for the ATO, and And talking to Susan Davenport after GenAI.mil went live, we were on a panel together, and she told me, well, hey, Nipper GPT we're going to turn off too. And I think that was, to Justin's point, as far as capabilities that serve the purpose at a point in time. We don't have to be afraid of when the next thing comes along. If it does truly have parity or provide superior value, we don't have to be afraid of turning that off and transitioning to something new.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the conversation, or the part of the conversation about what makes this time different.
Yep.
The willingness to stop doing things, whether it's let a pilot fail or walk away from a legacy program that doesn't meet the needs of the warfighter anymore. Those are hard things to do that I think leadership recently has demonstrated a willingness to do, and then stick to it when Congress pushes back or people ask questions or the decision is questioned. When you have that kind of top cover, the ability to really lean into the idea of that portfolio management and make trade-offs among what's in your portfolio becomes much more feasible.
Yep.
Yeah, you need options too, right? And so
Right.
there are more options available, which actually within the funnel makes some of this stuff more straightforward. And so if you have the data, if you have the leadership, and if you have the options, then you can pull this through. And so to kind of hit that bell a little bit more, these playbooks are producing wins. We want kind of every portfolio, every PAE, every group to have wins so that we can have kind of constructive, hey, here's what's happening on the edge for AI one place, here's what's happening on a ship, let's scale what's working. And so I like Andy's word, it's more of a playbook than a roadmap, because the playbook allows us to be modular and scale those wins forward. We'll roll that into the innovation adoption kit.
Yep. Last question on the GenAI.mil rollout. We are talking a lot about the initiative and the will and the decisions made to implement. But Andy, you also mentioned the 3 million people user base of this capability. By the way, I would like a copy of that email distro list. And just think what this event would be like next year. And so talk to me about how you're thinking about user adoption at that level. It can't just be the message to use it. Maybe it is as little as give them the capability and the users will come and let it prove itself. Or maybe it's something in the middle. How are you all thinking about it at CDAO?
Yeah, so I think it as far as GenAI.mil, the initial rollout can't be the end. And so today we actually rolled out agent space on top of Gemini. And so continue to provide additional features that provide additional value to users, that gives them the ability to see the value and continue to adopt those capabilities. And that's really where we continue to see the diffusion. And I saw a study a few weeks ago where it talked about there is not a reluctance, not just within the Pentagon or government, but in the private sector as well, of users being reluctant to adopt new capabilities. It's just they don't have the time to understand how they can save time. And so really providing users the ability to not only have the time, but also the training, which we have training available on GenAI.mil for users to be able to learn what those tools and capabilities are. And to your point, it's not just for those 3 million users, which that distro list was like the most Frankenstein thing you could ever imagine, but it worked. But continue to look across all user bases, and so looking into CJAT-C2 capabilities, looking into work that we're doing with our Title 50 partners, and really taking real-world events and understanding what data connections across the interagency do we need to have, It's demonstrating value, not just within the department, not just within the IC, but also other interagency partners as well.
So it's interesting. The data on, so outside, like the data that I've consumed externally on AI adoption, we've seen like we'd like to do and see more of that throughput. And so what internally we've looked at is, could we use more time on higher priority tasks? Yes. We put together a plan. We have a beta group looking to scale it, where we say, how much time are you saving? What are the highest impact tasks where you're saving time? And then that's kind of bottoms up. And then top down, which groups are using AI to most effect? And then let's give them carrots. So we're running a few little challenges on that to show the art of the possible, and then to say, hey, here's what pain relief looks like, here's what gain creation looks like, and then here's kind of like what that total is. And I'm a buy on that total and being able to really use that to drive change forward. That piece, I'll just tell you my personal experience is we work too much. Probably everyone on the stage work a lot. And so getting time back sounds great. And so what do you do with the time back? More work. And so this cycle of being more efficient and effective using AI, I have a table, my team built a form, they're using it, we'll scale it if it works. We say, hey, here are the tasks where I'm using AI and saving the most time, and then we tithe some of the savings. So some of that goes to learning and getting better, some of that goes to just more work, and then some of that goes to here is how we refocus efforts. And so actually divvying up the time savings to, again, create a flywheel of effectiveness is something that we're starting to experiment with. And I think if we have success, our friends at CDAO love to kind of partner and work together on these things. We'll tee it up and see if it scales further.
It's a team sport. And back to your aircraft example, I think for us, Justin talked about the highest priority tasks. The focus seems to always gravitate towards wanting to raise the ceiling, but how do you also raise the floor at the same time? And that's the workforce acumen to be able to adopt these tools, but then also integrating the capabilities into not just specific use cases, but broadly across the department too.
Yeah, and really let people determine their own use cases for them. One final topic that I want to hit on, sort of to bring us full circle, would be to come back to the industrial-based topic, but from a different angle, and more from the perspective of whether we have the capacity that we need in the United States in the national security apparatus. Does that capacity exist in the American and allied and partner industrial base today, or does it need to increase? And particularly as we think about major initiatives with massive demand, like shipbuilding or submarines or other force structure level kinds of decisions, how does that work intersect with your worlds? And just to give you a second to think about it, I'll give you a great example that we see in our world all the time, but that came up today. This morning, many of you saw Undersecretary of the Army, Mike Obadal, pull a cotter pin out of his jacket pocket, which I thought he just discovered it because he was putting IKEA furniture together last night.
Very Army. Army.
Yeah, it looks like
my wife's
something.
commander at one point, so yeah, she was very excited to see he was going to be here.
It looks like something you could buy easily at Home Depot. He hands it to his moderator and says, read the price tag. It was almost $1,000 for that DLA purchased and managed part. So after the introduction, I'm up in the green room, somebody from the team comes in, they flip ARC around on me and they say, do you think we should let the undersecretary know that there are about a dozen technically viable alternatives, and out of these alternatives that we found, 3 of them are under $10. At the end of the day, we don't do a lot of waving around, 17,000 times better or $100 million saved, although that's a real example from the Navy. Check with Ann Wood. Because readiness is what matters, not always time, like you're saying, or money. So how can we harness all of this exciting momentum that we have and leadership focus on AI and drive it into the challenges that plague us every day, like sustainment of the fleet and availability of new systems?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, 2 things. I talked about it being a team sport. I genuinely believe that, and that's not just for the civilians in government within the Pentagon. That includes industry partners too. We need the best athletes in the building and in the department to provide our warfighters with the best capabilities that they need. And so I think on the industry side is be ready to work. And so when we have an engagement and conversation about a capability, that needs to be something that if we give the thumbs up and we want to get after it, that on the industry side, those partners are ready to go, and that's all the logistics that go into coming into the building, and so we've been trying to work with more non-traditional partners to work through those challenges, and so I think that's also kind of the playbook that more broadly we need to develop. I think also. Looking forward, by 2028, the energy demand is really going to cap out at what our current supply is. And so all these capabilities are awesome. But at the end of the day, if we don't have the infrastructure to be able to continue to evolve and build to the scale that we need to be able to take the lessons learned that we're seeing in Iran, which, thinking of our service members downrange right now doing our nation's business, we need to be forward-looking and understand what those underlying requirements are that are going to enable us to go faster and continue to build and evolve what we're doing today.
Yeah, I would say Horizon 1 production, where we're spending money, isn't a fair place, and so there's mismatches, $900 versus $10. Bring the mismatches, scoreboard the totals. We all live in Missouri now. It's the show me state, but we want Indiana type results. We want to bully with wins and have just, so here's the point. Keep the mission and bring proof.
Perfect words to end on. Thank you so much, both of you.